Now let's begin. Derek Miller stood at the kitchen window of his modest suburban home, watching the October sun paint the trees in shades of amber and crimson. His son, 10-year-old Ethan, sat at the dining table behind him, swinging his legs beneath the chair as he worked through his math homework. The house was quiet except for the scratch of pencil on paper and the distant hum of traffic on Riverside Avenue. "Dad, what's 7 times 12 again?" Ethan asked. Derek turned from the window, a soft smile crossing his weathered face. At 42, he still carried the lean build of his younger years, though his dark hair now showed threads of silver at the temples. "What did we practice last week? Break it down." Ethan's brow furrowed in concentration, his green eyes, so much like his mother's, narrowing as he worked through the problem. Derek's chest tightened. 3 years had passed since Caroline's death, a sudden aneurysm that had stolen her from them without warning, but moments like these still caught him off guard. The resemblance was uncanny. 84, Ethan announced triumphantly. "That's my guy." Derek ruffled his son's sandy hair as the doorbell chimed. Through the frosted glass panel, he could make out the imposing silhouette of Evelyn Welch, his former mother-in-law. His jaw tightened. Evelyn swept into the house without waiting for an invitation, her designer coat swirling around her knees. At 63, she maintained the rigid posture of someone who had spent her life demanding attention and usually receiving it. Her silver hair was pulled back in an immaculate bun, and her cold blue eyes surveyed Derek's living room with barely concealed disdain. "Ethan, darling," she said, her voice honey-sweet as she ignored Derek entirely. "Grandma has a wonderful surprise for you." Derek crossed his arms. "Evelyn, you could have called first. I'm here to see my grandson, not you." She turned her attention back to Ethan, who had abandoned his homework and stood uncertainly by the table. "How would you like to go camping this weekend? A real adventure in the mountains. I've organized a whole group trip." Ethan's eyes lit up. "Really? Can I, Dad?" Derek's instincts screamed caution. Since Caroline's death, Evelyn had become increasingly intrusive, constantly criticizing his parenting, making veiled comments about custody, suggesting that a proper home, with proper resources, would be better for Ethan. She'd even hired a lawyer to explore grandparents' rights, though nothing had come of it yet. "I don't think," Derek began. "Oh, don't be ridiculous," Evelyn cut him off, her smile hardening. "The boy spends all his time cooped up in this house. He needs fresh air, proper activities. My late husband and I used to take Caroline camping all the time. It's practically a family tradition." Derek worked as a freelance investigative journalist, a career that had taught him to read people, to spot the lies beneath polished surfaces. Everything about Evelyn Welch set off alarm bells. She was a woman who had inherited wealth from her late husband's pharmaceutical company and wielded it like a weapon, using money and social connections to manipulate everyone around her. She'd never approved of Derek, a working journalist without family money or social pedigree, and had made Caroline's last years difficult with her constant interference. "Please, Dad." Ethan's pleading voice cut through his thoughts. Derek looked at his son, saw the hope in those green eyes, and felt his resolve waver. Ethan had been through so much, losing his mother so young. Maybe Derek was being paranoid. Maybe Evelyn was genuinely trying to connect with her grandson. "Where exactly is this camping trip?" Derek asked. "Blackwood National Forest. I've rented a private campsite. Very exclusive. There will be several families from the country club, the Welches, the Shepherds. All very respectable people." Evelyn pulled out her phone, showing him an official-looking reservation confirmation. Derek studied the document. It appeared legitimate. "And you'll have cell service?" "Of course. Though the point is to unplug and enjoy nature." Evelyn's smile didn't reach her eyes. "We leave Friday afternoon and return Sunday evening. I'll have him back by 7. Every fiber of Derek's being told him to refuse, but Ethan was already bouncing on his toes with excitement, and Derek could see the judgment in Evelyn's eyes, the silent accusation. "You're keeping him isolated. You're not giving him a normal childhood. You're failing him just like you failed my daughter." "All right," Derek heard himself say, "but Ethan calls me every night." "Naturally." Evelyn's smile widened, triumphant. "I'll pick him up Friday at 3. After she left, Derek returned to the window, watching her BMW glide away down the street. Something felt wrong. Deeply, fundamentally wrong. But he had no concrete reason to refuse, nothing beyond instinct and their mutual animosity. He pulled out his phone and called his closest friend, Jesse Coleman, a detective with the local police department. They'd grown up together in the same neighborhood, their friendship weathered by decades. "Derek, what's up?" Jesse's voice was warm, familiar. "I need a favor. Background check on Evelyn Welch. Deep as you can go without raising flags." There was a pause. "Your mother-in-law? What's going on?" Derek explained the camping trip, his concerns, the escalating tension since Caroline's death. Jesse listened, then said quietly, "I'll see what I can find. But Derek, if you're this worried, just say no." "I already said yes. Ethan's so excited, and I—" Derek trailed off. "I don't want to be the paranoid father who sees threats everywhere." "You're not paranoid. You're careful. There's a difference." Jesse's tone grew serious. "I'll call you by Thursday with whatever I find." Derek hung up and returned to Ethan, who was now drawing pictures of tents and campfires in the margins of his homework. The boy was humming, happier than Derek had seen him in months. Maybe I'm wrong, Derek thought. Maybe this will be good for him. But the unease settled in his stomach like a stone, heavy and cold, and wouldn't leave. Friday afternoon arrived with unseasonable warmth, the October sun bright and deceptive. Derek helped Ethan pack his sleeping bag and camping gear, triple-checking the emergency whistle attached to his backpack, the flashlight, the first aid kit. "Dad, Grandma said they have everything." Ethan protested, though his smile remained. He was wearing his favorite hoodie, the blue one with the faded NASA logo. "Humor me." Derek zipped the backpack closed. "And remember, call me tonight. Even if it's just for a minute." "I will. Promise." When Evelyn arrived, she wasn't alone. A black SUV idled behind her BMW, and Derek recognized Priscilla Shepard, another country club matron, sitting in the driver's seat. Two other women occupied the back seats, their faces unfamiliar. "Ready, darling?" Evelyn asked Ethan, ignoring Derek's attempt at eye contact. Derek crouched to Ethan's level. "Have fun, buddy. Be safe. I love you." "Love you too, Dad." Ethan hugged him quickly, then bounded toward Evelyn's car. As Derek straightened, he caught Evelyn's expression, a fleeting look of something cold and calculating that vanished the moment she noticed him watching. She smiled, plastic and sharp. "We'll take excellent care of him," she said. Derek watched them drive away, Ethan waving from the back window until the cars turned the corner and disappeared. The house felt cavernous in their absence, filled with a silence that pressed against his ears. He tried to work, pulling up his current investigation, a piece on pharmaceutical price fixing that had been consuming his attention for months. But the words on the screen blurred, and his mind kept wandering to Ethan, to Evelyn's smile, to the unanswered questions circling his thoughts. Jesse called at 6. "Got some things on Evelyn Welch. Nothing criminal, but interesting." "Tell me." "She's been in contact with a family law attorney, Gregory Morrison, for the past 8 months. Multiple meetings. My buddy in that firm says Morrison specializes in custody cases, specifically grandparents' rights." Derek's hand tightened on the phone. "She's planning something. There's more. After Caroline died, Evelyn tried to get herself named as Ethan's legal guardian in case something happened to you. Filed paperwork with the court, claimed you were unstable and financially irresponsible. Judge threw it out, but it's in the record. Jesus Christ. Derek, there's also a sealed case from 15 years ago. I can't access the details, but it involved Evelyn and allegations of child endangerment. Never went to trial, settled privately, records sealed. Big money makes things disappear." The stone in Derek's stomach grew heavier. "What kind of endangerment?" "Can't say. But the complainant was her daughter-in-law at the time, married to Evelyn's son from her first marriage. The marriage ended shortly after, and the son, Conrad Welch, moved to Europe. No contact with Evelyn since." Derek remembered Caroline mentioning a half-brother she'd never met, a topic Evelyn had refused to discuss. "Can you track him down?" "Already on it. I'll update you when I know more." Jesse paused. "Derek, I don't like this." "Your gut was right." After hanging up, Derek paced the house, checking his phone every few minutes. Ethan was supposed to call after dinner, around 8. By 8:30, Derek's anxiety had morphed into full-blown worry. By 9, he called Evelyn's number. It went straight to voicemail. He tried 3 more times. Nothing. Cell service, he told himself. They're in the mountains. Coverage is spotty. But the rational explanation did nothing to quiet the rising panic. Saturday crawled by in agonizing increments. Derek called Evelyn hourly, left messages, sent texts. No response. He contacted the Blackwood National Forest Ranger Station, gave them the campsite reservation number Evelyn had shown him. "Sir, that reservation is for a standard site, not a private one," the ranger told him. "And we show it under the name Shepherd, not Welch. Would you like me to do a wellness check?" "Yes, please. My son is 10. He was supposed to call me last night. We'll send someone out. Give us a few hours." The hours stretched like years. Derek tried Priscilla Shepherd's number, unlisted. He searched social media for the families Evelyn had mentioned, found nothing. Every lead dissolved into dead ends and deepening dread. Jesse stopped by Saturday evening, bringing takeout that Derek couldn't eat. They sat in the living room, the television playing unwatched as Derek's phone sat between them like a bomb waiting to detonate. "They'll find him," Jesse said. "Kids wander off at campsites all the time. He probably just lost track of time." Derek wanted to believe him, but he knew Evelyn. He knew her calculating eyes, her hatred of him, her obsession with control. Sunday morning brought no news. Derek called the ranger station again. "We checked the Shepherd site yesterday evening, sir. Your son wasn't there." The group said he was with his grandmother at a different site, about 3 miles north. "We're heading there now." "What do you mean, different site?" "They're split up." "Apparently. We'll call you back." Derek's phone slipped from his nerveless fingers. 3 miles. Ethan was 3 miles away from the group, alone with Evelyn. The call came at 2:15 on Sunday afternoon. "Mr. Miller? This is Ranger Anthony Daniels with Blackwood National Forest. We've found your son." Relief flooded through Derek, so intense it left him lightheaded. "Thank God. Is he okay?" The pause that followed was too long, too heavy. "Sir, you need to come to Blackwood Medical Center immediately. Your son is being treated for severe hypothermia and dehydration. We found him tied to a tree, approximately 3 miles from the main campsite. He'd been there for approximately 48 hours. The words didn't make sense. Derek heard them, but his brain couldn't process them, couldn't assemble them into coherent meaning. Tied. Tree. 48 hours. What? The word came out strangled. "Your son was restrained and left alone in the wilderness, Mr. Miller. We're filing a full report. The sheriff is en route." Derek's vision tunneled. "Where's my mother-in-law?" "We found her campsite 3 miles south. She's been there the whole time with her group. They all knew about your son's location." The ranger's voice hardened with barely suppressed anger. "When we asked why they left him there," she smiled and said, "he needed to learn what real hardship feels like. His father's made him soft." Derek stood in his living room, phone pressed to his ear, and felt something fundamental break inside him. Not his strength, that crystallized into diamond-hard rage. Not his resolve, that became an unbreakable promise. What broke was his faith in humanity's baseline decency, his belief that some lines simply weren't crossed. Evelyn Welch had crossed every line, and Derek Miller was going to make her pay. He grabbed his keys and ran for the door, Jesse already on his feet behind him. The 2-hour drive to Blackwood Medical Center passed in a blur of highway and mounting fury. Derek's hands shook on the wheel, his mind conjuring images of Ethan, small, scared, alone in the dark forest, tied and helpless while his grandmother sat 3 miles away, warm and comfortable, knowing exactly where he was and choosing to leave him there. The hospital was a low building surrounded by pine trees. Derek burst through the emergency room doors, Jesse close behind, and nearly collided with a sheriff's deputy. "Derek Miller," he gasped. "My son, Ethan Miller. Room 104. A nurse said, her face pale with sympathy. "He's stable." Derek ran down the corridor, his shoes squeaking on linoleum, and pushed through the door to find Ethan in a hospital bed, wrapped in thermal blankets, and 4 in his small arm. His son's face was red with windburn, his lips chapped and cracked, dark circles shadowing his eyes. But he was conscious, and when he saw Derek, he started to cry. "Dad!" Derek was at his side instantly, gathering him carefully into his arms, feeling the fragile trembling of his son's body. "I've got you. You're safe now. I've got you," she said. Ethan's voice cracked. "She said you didn't want me anymore. That you told her to teach me a lesson. That I was too soft, too weak, and you were ashamed." "No." Derek pulled back, cupping Ethan's face in his hands, forcing his son to meet his eyes. "Listen to me. None of that is true. Not one word. I love you more than anything in this world. I never said those things. I would never say those things. Do you understand me? Ethan nodded, tears streaming down his face. I was so scared. It got so cold at night, and I couldn't move, and I kept calling for help, but nobody came. A doctor entered, a kind-faced woman with gray hair. Mr. Miller? I'm Dr. Ruth Murray. Your son is going to be fine. Mild hypothermia, dehydration, some rope burns on his wrists and ankles, but no permanent damage. We want to keep him overnight for observation. Whatever he needs. Derek couldn't let go of Ethan's hand. Whatever he needs. Dr. Murray's expression hardened. What happened to your son constitutes child abuse and endangerment. I've already filed a mandatory report. The sheriff will want your statement. Derek nodded, but his attention remained on Ethan. His son, who had spent 2 days and nights believing his father had abandoned him, left him to suffer deliberately. The psychological cruelty of it was almost worse than the physical danger. A heavy footsteps announced the arrival of Sheriff Glenn Bradshaw, a barrel-chested man in his 50s with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too much cruelty to be shocked anymore, but clearly were shocked now. Mr. Miller, I need to ask your son some questions when he's up to it. Not now, Derek said firmly. Tomorrow, when he's rested. The sheriff nodded. Fair enough, but I need to know, did you have any knowledge of or consent to what your mother-in-law did? None whatsoever. I thought Ethan was on a supervised camping trip with multiple families. I never would have agreed if I'd known. Derek's voice broke. He steadied himself. Where is she? Still at the campsite. We've detained her and the other adults present. 3 women, Priscilla Shepard, Maribel Lim, and Evelyn's sister, Lily Shields. They're all claiming they were following Evelyn's instructions, that it was meant to be character building. The sheriff's disgust was palpable. We're bringing them in for questioning. I want to press every charge possible. Child endangerment, reckless endangerment, false imprisonment, child abuse. We've got plenty to work with. And Mr. Miller? Off the record, the sheriff stepped closer, lowering his voice. In 30 years of law enforcement, I've seen a lot of evil. But leaving a child tied to a tree while you sit comfortable 3 miles away, knowing exactly where he is, and choosing not to help? That's a special kind of cruel. Derek's jaw clenched. She's going to pay for this. She will. The law will make sure of that. The sheriff's expression suggested he understood Derek's rage, but was warning him away from vigilante justice. But Derek was already thinking beyond the law, because he knew people like Evelyn Welch. He'd investigated them, exposed them, watched them slip through legal cracks with expensive lawyers and sealed settlements. He knew that money and connections could soften even the harshest punishment. The law would do what it could, but Derek would do what the law couldn't. After the sheriff left, Jesse pulled Derek aside in the hallway. I know that look. Whatever you're thinking, be smart about it. I'm always smart, Derek said quietly. That's what makes me dangerous. He returned to Ethan's bedside, sat in the uncomfortable hospital chair, and held his son's hand while the boy finally fell into an exhausted sleep. And in the antiseptic quiet of that hospital room, Derek Miller began to plan his revenge. He thought about Evelyn's wealth, her social standing, her pride in her family name. He thought about the sealed case from 15 years ago, the estranged son in Europe, the web of secrets she'd used money to bury. Derek was an investigative journalist. Uncovering secrets was his profession. Destroying reputations was his specialty. And he'd never had a more deserving target. By the time dawn broke over the mountains, painting the hospital windows gold, Derek had the skeleton of a plan forming in his mind. It would take time, patience, and resources. It would require him to be smarter, more ruthless, and more thorough than he'd ever been. But Derek Miller was going to take Evelyn Welch apart piece by piece. And when he was done, she would have nothing, no money, no reputation, no freedom, and no one to blame but herself. The charges would be filed. The trial would proceed. Justice would run its course. But that was just the beginning. Derek's real revenge would be so much worse. Jesse returned Monday morning with coffee and news. Conrad Welch. Found him in Brussels. He's willing to talk. Says he's been waiting for someone to ask questions about his mother for 15 years. Derek looked at his sleeping son, then back at Jesse. Set up a call. I want to know everything. The conversation with Conrad Welch took place that evening, after Ethan had been discharged and was resting at home under the watchful eye of Derek's neighbor, a retired nurse named Karen O'Connor, who'd been horrified by what happened and immediately volunteered to help. Conrad's face appeared on Derek's laptop screen. A man in his early 50s with Evelyn's sharp features but kinder eyes. He sat in what looked like a modern European apartment, afternoon light streaming through the windows behind him. "Mr. Miller," Conrad said, his accent carrying traces of British English. "Jesse told me what happened to your son. I'm deeply sorry and completely unsurprised. Your mother tried to have something similar happen before?" Derek asked, his recorder running. Conrad's expression darkened. "Not exactly the same, but close enough. My ex-wife, Gail McGee, we were married for 6 years before it fell apart. We had a daughter, Sophie. She was 4 when Gail caught my mother." He paused, his jaw working. "My mother took Sophie to a shopping mall, supposedly for ice cream and a movie. Gail followed them on a hunch. She found Sophie locked in my mother's car in a parking garage, windows up, summer heat. Sophie had been there for over 2 hours while my mother had lunch with friends." Derek's blood ran cold. "Jesus." Gail called the police, but by the time they arrived, my mother had just returned to the car. She claimed Sophie had wanted to nap, and she'd only been gone 20 minutes. She had witnesses, the friends she'd lunched with, who backed her story. Gail couldn't prove the timeline, but she knew. She filed for emergency custody, got it, and told me I had to choose Sophie's safety or my mother. "You chose your daughter. I chose exile. My mother controls the family trust, the inheritance, the business connections. She made it clear that if I testified against her, I'd be cut off completely. But more than that, she'd make Gail's life hell, ruin her career, her reputation. So Gail and I divorced. I gave up all parental rights to protect Sophie from my mother's reach, and I left the country." Conrad's voice was heavy with old pain. "I haven't seen my daughter in 15 years. But she's safe. She grew up normal, happy, far from Evelyn's influence." "Why did your mother do it?" "Control. Punishment. Testing boundaries." Conrad leaned forward. "My mother is a narcissist with sociopathic tendencies. She sees people as objects to be manipulated. When they don't comply with her vision of how things should be, she punishes them. Gail challenged her once, disagreed with her publicly at a charity event. So my mother punished our daughter to punish Gail." Derek absorbed this, pieces clicking into place. "She never approved of me. Said I wasn't good enough for Caroline, wasn't wealthy enough, didn't have the right connections. Then Caroline died, and you became the sole barrier between Evelyn and Ethan." Conrad's eyes were sympathetic. "She wants control of your son, Mr. Miller, whether through custody or intimidation. What she did was designed to break you, to prove you couldn't protect him, to create a narrative where she's the only one capable of providing proper care. She miscalculated. Badly. My mother's arrogance is her weakness. She believes her money makes her untouchable." Conrad paused. "I've spent 15 years building a life away from her toxicity. But I've also spent 15 years collecting information. Every time she's paid someone off, every sealed settlement, every NDA she's forced people to sign. I have names, dates, amounts. I have testimony from people she's destroyed who would love to see her face consequences." Derek's pulse quickened. "You'd be willing to share that information? On one condition. You destroy her completely. Not just criminal charges, those she can weather with her lawyers. I mean, you take away everything that matters to her. The money, the reputation, the social standing. You make sure she can never hurt another child." "That's exactly what I intend to do." Conrad smiled grimly. "Then we have a deal. I'll send you everything I have. Bank records, witness statements, documentation of at least 7 different instances of child endangerment she's paid to make disappear. There's also evidence of financial fraud related to her late husband's pharmaceutical company, insider trading, price manipulation, bribing FDA officials. She could go to prison for years. If the evidence is presented correctly, yes. But Mr. Miller, my mother has survived scandals before. She's connected, smart, and ruthless. You'll need to be more ruthless." Derek thought of Ethan's tear-stained face, his small voice saying she told me you didn't want me anymore, and felt his resolve harden into something unbreakable. "I'm an investigative journalist," Derek said quietly. "I've taken down corrupt politicians, exposed corporate fraud, and ruined criminal enterprises. Your mother is just another monster who thought she was above consequences. And I'm very good at proving monsters wrong." Over the next week, Conrad's files arrived, gigabytes of documents, recordings, financial records. Derek spread them across his dining room table, his home office, his laptop screens. Jesse helped where he could, running background checks, verifying information, connecting dots. The picture that emerged was staggering. Evelyn Welch hadn't just endangered children, though there were at least 8 documented instances Conrad had uncovered, each one settled privately with massive payouts and ironclad NDAs. She'd also embezzled millions from her late husband's pharmaceutical company before selling it, manipulated stock prices, bribed federal officials to fast-track dangerous drugs, and destroyed the careers of anyone who challenged her. She was a monster wearing a country club smile, and Derek was going to rip off the mask. But criminal charges alone wouldn't be enough. Evelyn would hire the best lawyers money could buy, drag out trials for years, potentially walk away with minimal consequences. Derek needed something more devastating, more permanent. He needed to destroy her where it would hurt most: her pride, her reputation, and her money. The plan crystallized over sleepless nights and endless pots of coffee. It was complex, multi-layered, and would require perfect timing. But if it worked, Evelyn Welch would lose everything. Step 1 was already in motion. The criminal charges for child endangerment were filed, Evelyn was arrested and released on bail, and the preliminary hearing was set for 6 weeks away. The local media had picked up the story: wealthy socialite accused of leaving grandson tied to tree, and the coverage was uniformly damning. But Derek wanted more than local scandal. He wanted national attention, the kind that would make Evelyn's name synonymous with cruelty. He reached out to Lorenzo Conrad, a producer at a major news network he'd worked with before. Lorenzo owed Derek a favor after Derek's investigation into pharmaceutical fraud had given the network an Emmy-winning expose. "Derek, I heard about your son. I'm so sorry. What can I do? I've got a story for you. Bigger than one incident. Multi-generational pattern of child abuse, financial crimes, corruption, all centered on one very wealthy, very connected woman who's been buying her way out of consequences for decades." Lorenzo was quiet for a moment. "You have evidence?" "Ironclad. Multiple witnesses willing to go on camera now that criminal charges are filed. Financial documents. A whole paper trail of destroyed lives and sealed settlements. Send me everything. If it's as big as you say, we'll run it prime time. National exposure. One more thing," Derek said. "I want to be the one who interviews her. On camera." Lorenzo laughed. "Derek, you're the victim's father. That's a massive conflict of interest." "Exactly. Which is why it'll be compelling television. The father confronting the grandmother who tortured his child. You can't buy that kind of emotion. And I promise you, I'll keep it professional. You're going to eviscerate her on national TV. I'm going to give her enough rope to hang herself. All I need is the platform." Lorenzo agreed. The interview was scheduled for 3 weeks away, enough time for Derek to prepare, for the story to gain traction, and for Evelyn's lawyers to agree to the sit-down, thinking they could control the narrative. They were wrong. While Derek worked on the public destruction, Jesse was helping with the legal angles. The charges against Evelyn, Priscilla Shepard, Maribel Lim, and Lily Shields were serious, but the prosecution needed Ethan's testimony. The boy had nightmares every night, waking up screaming, convinced he was still tied to the tree. Dr. Ruth Murray recommended a child psychologist, Cara Clay, who specialized in trauma. Ethan began twice-weekly sessions, slowly processing what had happened to him. Derek sat in on the sessions when allowed, listening to his son describe those 48 hours in halting, painful detail. The cold that had seeped into his bones. The darkness when night fell. The sounds of animals moving through the underbrush. The terror that his father really had abandoned him, that he'd done something terrible to deserve this punishment. Every word was a knife in Derek's heart. But Ethan was strong, stronger than Evelyn had anticipated. With Cara's help, he began to understand that what happened wasn't his fault, that his father loved him, that bad people sometimes do bad things, and it doesn't mean the victim deserved it. And crucially, Ethan said he wanted to testify. He wanted to tell people what his grandmother had done. "She needs to know she can't do this to other kids," Ethan said during one session, his voice small but determined. "What if she has other grandkids someday? What if she does this to them?" Derek's chest swelled with pride and heartbreak. His son, at 10 years old, was thinking about protecting others. Evelyn had tried to break him and instead had forged steel. The preliminary hearing arrived. Derek sat in the courtroom, Jesse beside him, and watched Evelyn Welch walk in wearing a demure gray suit, her silver hair perfect, her expression carefully neutral. Her lawyer, a shark named Herbert Gregg from one of the state's most expensive firms, oozed confidence. The prosecution laid out the basics. Ethan had been taken on a camping trip under false pretenses, separated from the main group, restrained, and left alone for approximately 48 hours in October weather that dropped to near freezing at night. Evelyn and her companions had remained at a separate campsite 3 miles away, knowing the child's location and condition. Herbert Gregg argued that it was a misunderstanding, a cultural difference in parenting philosophies, that Evelyn had believed the experience would be character-building and had arranged for periodic checks that had somehow failed to occur. It was bullshit, and everyone in the courtroom knew it. The judge, a stern woman named Janelle McKenna, wasn't buying it. "Mr. Gregg, your client left a 10-year-old child restrained in wilderness conditions for 2 days without food or water. There is no parenting philosophy that excuses child endangerment. Your Honor, Mrs. Welch deeply regrets the outcome of what was intended as a survival skills exercise. A survival skills exercise requires supervision, instruction, and safety measures. This was abandonment. The charges will proceed to trial." Judge McKenna's gavel fell. Evelyn's mask slipped for just a moment, her eyes flashing with fury as she glared at Derek across the courtroom. Then the composure returned, the society matron face sliding back into place. But Derek had seen the truth underneath, and he knew that the criminal trial was just the opening act. The real destruction was yet to come. That evening, Derek received an email from an encrypted address. The message contained a single line. "She's trying to intimidate the witnesses. Check your bank accounts." Derek's blood chilled. He immediately logged into his banking portal and found 3 fraudulent charges totaling $15,000, all made that day. His credit cards had been maxed out. A loan application had been filed in his name and approved for $30,000. Someone was trying to sabotage him financially. He called Jesse, who arrived within the hour and began making calls. By midnight, they'd traced the fraud to a series of identity theft attempts originating from an IP address registered to a private investigation firm that, surprise, had received a $50,000 payment from Evelyn Welch 3 days prior. "She's trying to make you look financially unstable," Jesse said grimly. "Probably building a case for custody, arguing you can't provide for Ethan. Can we prove it was her?" "Working on it. But Derek, this is just the beginning. She's going to come at you with everything she has." Derek had expected this. People like Evelyn didn't surrender quietly. "Let her try? I've got something she doesn't." "What's that?" "The truth. And an audience of millions who are about to hear it." The network interview was scheduled for the following week. Derek spent every available moment preparing, reviewing Conrad's files, rehearsing questions, anticipating Evelyn's deflections. Lorenzo had assembled a team of producers and fact-checkers, verifying every piece of evidence, preparing graphics, and supporting documentation. The night before the interview, Ethan couldn't sleep. Derek found him at midnight, sitting in the kitchen with a glass of water, staring at nothing. "Can't shut your brain off?" Derek asked gently. Ethan shook his head. "What if people don't believe us? What if they think Grandma was right, that I needed to be tougher?" Derek sat beside his son, choosing his words carefully. "Ethan, what happened to you was wrong. Not because you're weak. You're one of the strongest people I know. It was wrong because no child should be treated that way, period. And people will believe us because we're telling the truth. The truth is powerful. Are you scared? About tomorrow?" Derek considered lying, then decided against it. "A little, but I'm more angry than scared. And I'm going to use that anger to make sure your grandmother never hurts anyone again." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I'm angry too. Is that okay?" "It's more than okay. It's healthy. You have every right to be angry." Derek pulled his son close. "But we channel that anger into something productive. We don't let it make us cruel like her. We use it to protect others, to seek justice, to make things right." "Dad." "Yeah, buddy. When this is over, can we go camping? Like, real camping? Just us." Derek's throat tightened. "Absolutely. Anywhere you want. Somewhere warm," Ethan said with a small smile. "Really, really warm." They sat together in the quiet kitchen, father and son, survivors preparing for battle. And Derek made a silent promise. By the time he was finished, Evelyn Welch would wish she'd never learned his son's name. The interview was filmed in a neutral studio, 3 cameras, professional lighting. Evelyn arrived with Herbert Gregg and a publicist, all of them radiating confidence. She'd clearly been media trained, her posture perfect, her expression carefully calibrated to project dignity and concern. Derek waited in a separate room, watching the monitors as Lorenzo did the preliminary interview with Evelyn, establishing the basic facts, giving her space to present her version of events. "I love my grandson deeply," Evelyn said, her voice quavering just enough to suggest emotion. "What happened was a terrible misunderstanding. I was trying to give Ethan experiences his father couldn't provide, outdoor skills, resilience, the kind of character-building activities my late husband and I valued. I deeply regret that the execution fell short of my intentions. Mrs. Welch, your grandson was tied to a tree for 48 hours in near-freezing temperatures. How is that character building? The restraints were meant to be temporary, to simulate a survival scenario where he'd have to problem-solve his way free. But there was a miscommunication with my companions about the monitoring schedule. No one checked on him as frequently as planned. It was a masterful deflection, Derek had to admit. She was painting herself as a well-meaning grandmother whose plan had gone awry, not as a sadist who deliberately tortured a child. Time for Derek to enter. He walked onto the set, and Evelyn's composure flickered when she saw him. She'd expected a soft interview, a chance to control the narrative. Instead, she was facing the father whose child she'd brutalized, and the cameras were rolling. "Mr. Miller, thank you for joining us," Lorenzo said. "Mrs. Welch has just explained that what happened to your son was an unfortunate miscommunication. What's your response?" Derek looked directly at Evelyn, his expression calm, but his eyes hard as diamonds. "It wasn't a miscommunication. It was deliberate child abuse. And the evidence proves it." Herbert Gregg started to object, but Lorenzo cut him off. "We'll let Mr. Miller present his evidence." Derek laid out the case methodically, like the journalist he was. He presented the timeline. Evelyn and her group had arrived at the forest Friday afternoon, set up 2 separate camps 3 miles apart, and taken Ethan to the isolated location. They'd tied him to a tree using professional-grade restraints, not ropes that could be problem-solved, and left him without food, water, or shelter. The ranger's report confirms that your group visited the camp where Ethan was located only once, Saturday morning, to verify he was still restrained. Then you returned to your comfortable camp and spent the rest of the weekend socializing while my 10-year-old son suffered in the cold. Evelyn's mask was cracking. "That's not. We were going to retrieve him Sunday morning. But you didn't. The rangers found him Sunday afternoon. You would have left him there indefinitely if they hadn't intervened." "This is character assassination," Herbert Gregg sputtered. "No," Derek said quietly. "This is the truth. And there's more." He pulled out Conrad's files, the documentation of Evelyn's previous incidents of child endangerment. He named names, showed sealed settlement agreements, presented testimony from witnesses who were finally willing to speak now that they weren't alone. The woman whose daughter Evelyn had locked in a hot car. The grandfather whose grandson Evelyn had accidentally left at a rest stop 200 miles from home. The families she'd paid off, the lawyers she'd bribed, the pattern of cruelty stretching back decades. Evelyn's face had gone white, then red. "Those settlements were confidential." "Were," Derek agreed. "But several of your victims have decided that protecting other children is more important than your NDAs. They're prepared to testify. This is slander. My attorney will." "Your attorney can't stop the truth, Mrs. Welch. And the truth is that you're a child abuser who's used your wealth to avoid consequences. But that ends now." The interview ran for 90 minutes. By the end, Evelyn was visibly shaking, her composure shattered, her publicist frantically trying to get Lorenzo to stop filming. But the cameras kept rolling, capturing every moment of her unraveling. When it aired 3 days later, the response was volcanic. Social media exploded with hashtags. Hashtag Justice for Ethan. Hashtag Welch Accountability. The story went national, then international. News outlets picked it up, op-eds were written, child safety advocates rallied. Evelyn Welch became the most hated woman in America overnight. But Derek wasn't done. While the public fury built, he was working the financial angle with Conrad's help. They discovered that Evelyn's wealth wasn't as secure as she believed. Most of it was tied up in a family trust established by her late husband, with specific stipulations about the beneficiaries and the trust's dissolution in cases of criminal conviction. If Evelyn was convicted of child endangerment, the trust would automatically dissolve, distributing the assets to the other beneficiaries, primarily Conrad, as the eldest child, and a series of charities. Evelyn would lose everything. Derek also uncovered her pharmaceutical fraud, the bribe she'd paid to FDA officials to fast-track dangerous drugs. He passed that information to federal prosecutors, who opened an investigation. The insider trading charges followed. Each revelation was another nail in the coffin of Evelyn's reputation and fortune. Her country club membership was revoked. Her friends abandoned her. The charities she'd chaired removed her from their boards. Society columns that had once fawned over her now vilified her. Evelyn Welch was being erased from polite society, and Derek was orchestrating every step. The criminal trial began 8 weeks after Ethan's rescue. The prosecution's case was overwhelming. They had the Ranger's testimony, the medical reports, Ethan's statement, and the testimony of the other women who'd been present, Priscilla, Maribel, and Lily, all of whom had taken plea deals and agreed to testify against Evelyn in exchange for reduced sentences. Ethan took the stand on day 4, small and brave in his button-up shirt and slacks, and told the jury exactly what had happened. He didn't cry, didn't falter. He looked directly at Evelyn while he described the cold, the fear, the certainty that he'd been abandoned. "She told me my dad didn't love me anymore," Ethan said clearly. "She said I deserved to be left there because I was weak. But I knew she was lying. My dad would never abandon me." Derek watched from the gallery, his hands clenched so tight his knuckles were white. Jesse sat beside him, a steadying presence. When it was the defense's turn, Herbert Gregg tried to paint Evelyn as a misunderstood matriarch whose good intentions had been twisted by circumstances. But the evidence was insurmountable, and the jury wasn't buying it. Deliberations lasted 6 hours. The verdict, guilty on all counts. Evelyn Welch stood as the judge read the sentence. 8 years in state prison, to be followed by 10 years of supervised probation. She would never be allowed unsupervised contact with minors again. The family trust dissolution was automatic, stripping her of her wealth. But even that wasn't the end. 2 weeks later, federal charges were filed for the pharmaceutical fraud. The insider trading case followed. By the time all the legal machinery finished grinding, Evelyn Welch was facing an additional 15 years in federal prison and millions in fines. She would die in prison, penniless and forgotten. Derek stood outside the courthouse after the final sentencing, Ethan beside him, Jesse and Conrad Welch, who'd flown in from Brussels for the occasion, flanking them. The media shouted questions, but Derek ignored them all except one. "Mr. Miller, how do you feel now that justice has been served?" Derek looked down at his son, then back at the cameras. "Justice isn't just about punishment. It's about protection. My son is safe now. Other children are safe now. That's what matters. As for Evelyn Welch, she made her choices. She'll live with the consequences." That evening, Derek and Ethan returned to their quiet suburban home. Derek made spaghetti, Ethan's favorite, and they ate dinner at the kitchen table, the same table where this nightmare had begun months ago. "Dad," Ethan asked, twirling pasta on his fork, "is it really over? The legal stuff?" "Yeah, buddy. It's over. She can't hurt you anymore." "Good." Ethan took a bite, chewed thoughtfully. "Can we still go camping? Somewhere warm." Derek smiled, feeling something loosen in his chest that had been tight for months. "How about the beach? Camping under the stars, but with sand instead of forest." "Perfect." 2 months later, Derek and Ethan stood on a beach in Southern California, the Pacific Ocean stretching endlessly before them. They'd set up a tent just above the tide line, and as the sun set in brilliant oranges and purples, Ethan ran along the surf, laughing, free. Derek watched his son with a sense of profound gratitude. They'd survived. More than that, they'd triumphed. Ethan was in therapy, processing his trauma, growing stronger every day. The nightmares were less frequent. The fear was fading. And Evelyn Welch was exactly where she belonged. Locked away, powerless, her legacy destroyed. Derek's phone buzzed. A message from Conrad. "Thank you. For the first time in 15 years, I feel like my mother can't hurt anyone. My daughter wants to meet you and Ethan, when you're ready." Derek typed back, "We'd like that." Another message, this one from Lorenzo. "Your expose won the Polk Award. Congratulations." Derek pocketed his phone without responding. Awards didn't matter. Justice mattered. Protection mattered. ensuring that monsters like Evelyn Welch faced consequences mattered. "Dad, come here," Ethan called, pointing at something in a tide pool. Derek jogged over, crouching beside his son to examine a starfish clinging to a rock. Ethan's face was bright with wonder, all traces of the scared, traumatized boy in the hospital bed replaced by this joy, this resilience, this strength. "You know what's cool?" Ethan said, carefully touching the starfish. "They can regenerate. If they lose an arm, they grow it back." "Pretty impressive," Derek agreed. "Kind of like us, huh? We got hurt, but we're growing back stronger." Derek pulled his son into a hug, this brilliant, brave kid who'd endured hell and come out the other side still believing in wonder. "Yeah, buddy. Exactly like us." As the stars emerged overhead and the campfire crackled beside their tent, Derek Miller realized that this moment, this peace, this future, was the real victory. Evelyn had tried to destroy them and had instead forged them into something unbreakable. They'd survived. They'd healed. They'd won. And somewhere in a prison cell hundreds of miles away, Evelyn Welch sat alone in the dark, stripped of everything she'd valued, finally facing the consequences of her cruelty. Justice, Derek thought, didn't always look like courtrooms and sentences. Sometimes justice looked like a father and son camping on a beach, laughing under the stars, building a future the monsters had tried to steal. Sometimes justice was simply refusing to be broken. And in that refusal, in that resilience, lay the ultimate revenge. Living well, loving fiercely, and teaching the next generation that kindness, not cruelty, was true strength. Derek Miller had taken his revenge. But more importantly, he'd protected his son, exposed a predator, and ensured no other child would suffer at Evelyn Welch's hands. That was worth more than any punishment. That was everything. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.